All right, so you've arrived at the deep dive. We are going to get into something that a lot of people have been discussing on this particular day. It's true. The case that involves Joni Lamb, who is a co-founder of Daystar, is the one in question here. Exactly. Moreover, Doug Weiss, the fact that we have all of these passages in front of us is similar to what we have been referring to as pasted text. And, just delving into all of the many claims and critiques that have been made about the situation. As a result, I suppose that the purpose of this in-depth investigation that we are conducting today is to, have a better understanding of what the core of this debate is. Exactly. Specifically, what are the complaints that are being leveled against this practice? Also, what are the repercussions for each and every person that is involved in this particular situation? It's true, and we are going to accomplish everything based on, simply this stuff that we have right here in front of us. Exactly the same. At this point, it appears that there is a lot going on. In a word, yes. I believe that one of the things is that a narrative of worry that is forming, really looking at, personal conduct and how it plays out on a very public platform is something that really stands out to us from this material that has been copied in. It's true, it is especially prevalent among a certain religious group. It's true. Therefore, it is undeniably a problem with several facets. Indeed, it is. I believe that our primary objective here need to be to make an effort to thoroughly investigate the most important concerns that are brought up by this information. It's true. All right. The revelation that Joni Lamb routinely received calls from Doug Weiss is one of the first things that comes to my attention, at least in the text. This is one of the things that stands out to me, for example, all the time. Furthermore, it appears that even at family gatherings. Indeed. That being said, as the excerpts point out, this particular element kind of instantly brings up the subject of priorities. Exactly. The notion of where the attention of public figures resides is something that comes to mind when we think of public figures, particularly those who are in positions of authority. If you think about it, that takes on a lot of importance. It's true. On the basis of this text, I believe that critics are viewing this conduct as maybe having a focus that is set in the wrong place. All right? The implication is that, as you are aware, these calls took precedence over time spent with family. To add insult to injury, it is not only the time, the time that is invested exactly, it is being called into doubt. This issue that all of these calls may be seen as indicating something that is referred to as improper emotional closeness is brought up in the text in a very precise manner. When it comes to it, what is the underlying concern? As a result, the primary concern, as expressed by the specialists, is concerning the nature of the connection that is being inferred by such consistent communication. It's true, especially when it kind of interferes with personal and family times, as you would know. I mean, this hits on some very, broadly held cultural standards on the bounds of professional work. It's true. And the sorts of relationships that are regarded as suitable, particularly for those who are in positions of authority and who are frequently subjected to a great deal of scrutiny from the general public. Exactly, it's true. All right, we are now going to move on to what appears to be the core of all that has been discussed. Certainly, hypocrisy and dishonesty are two of the most significant charges that have been leveled against Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss in this situation. Is there any evidence to support these assertions? To put it another way, what does the content truly say? Therefore, the language that was reproduced reveals in a plain manner that the allegations of hypocrisy and dishonesty are really based on the notion that their activities contravene what are defined as biblical standards. In addition, you should be aware that in the context of a faith-based organization such as Daystar, the perceived commitment of its leaders to those beliefs is vitally essential for the legitimacy of the organization. It's true. Therefore, any apparent variation from that might lead to, quite major criticism and a questioning of their legitimacy. This phenomenon is known as difference. In addition, the language makes it clear that these purported infractions are supposed to be seen as a kind of weakening the essential trust that exists within the Christian community. In addition, to further illustrate the concept of deceit, the book provides a particularly specific scenario involving Doug Weiss. It's true, the fact that he continued to wear his wedding band on Daystar set even after he had legally separated from his wife. Oh my goodness. In terms of how the general public perceives things, I believe here is where things start to become very fascinating. Exactly. The question is, why is this one particular action eliciting such a negative reaction, if you will. In any case, I believe that it is very fascinating to contemplate the power that visual symbols have in preserving the faith of the general public. Several passages give the impression that a significant number of individuals consider this to be a highly purposeful attempt to mislead the audience. I see, exactly. As a result, Doug Weiss, who, as you may know, is also a marriage counselor, is viewed as being inauthentic since he continues to create this illusion of marital stability through the wedding ring even after the divorce. It's true, exactly. It would appear that this behavior is in direct opposition to the image that he has worked so hard to establish, and his audience perceives this as a violation of their faith in him. Moreover, that is the subject that you brought up. A marital counselor is what he does. This appears to be an important point to make. The text highlights how, this behavior actually has a negative impact on his trustworthiness in that particular capacity. It's true. The situation is almost as if it would be different if he were, for example, working in an area that is completely unrelated to this one. In a word, yes. In addition, if this were, a chef or whatever else, it would have a different impact. It is true due to the fact that he is a marital counselor. This perceived mismatch between public appearance and private life is compounded when we take into consideration professional ethics and the expectations that are put on individuals who give advice in these extremely sensitive areas such as marriage. It's true. His audience would naturally anticipate, a high degree of congruence between his on-screen character and his actual personal conduct, particularly with regard to the connections he maintains. I see. In light of this, let's discuss the ways in which this affects, leadership and reputation. Certainly. The text implies that Joni Lamb's concentration on Doug Weiss, as well as all of these phone conversations, particularly during family time, is seen to be detrimental to her own reputation and, as you may be aware, raises issues about her judgment as a leader at Daystar. The extracts establish a very compelling connection between her activities and, the damage that has been done to her public image as a result of her actions. In addition, this brings us full circle to the first argument that was made concerning the perceived priority. If the acts of a leader are perceived as disregarding core values such as a devotion to family, it will invariably raise issues about the leader's overall judgment and their capacity to lead successfully. In addition, the wording makes it quite clear that the incident has led to widespread criticism of Daystar's leadership in its entirety. Therefore, it is not as if they are singular occurrences. It is possessing, as you are aware. After that, it is inevitable that this brings us to the issues that are of importance to the larger community. It's true. As a direct consequence of this circumstance, the book makes reference to the rising requests for responsibility and openness that are being made within the Christian community. Exactly. It is important to note that the concept of a community holding its leaders accountable to certain ethical norms is crucial in this context. I see. In addition, the extracts provide the impression that the activities of Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss are seen as a threat to the fundamental principles that are held in high regard within the Christian community. These principles include responsibility and honesty. It is important to note that this is not just about the shortcomings of individuals in the perspective of critics. There is a possibility that this will really undermine people's faith in religious leadership in a broader sense. So it sounds like what the text is stressing is, this time when the community is sort of like, actively analyzing the behavior of its leaders and expecting, a certain amount of ethical conduct and openness in response, without a doubt. Furthermore, this brings up some pretty significant considerations regarding the expectations that are placed on public individuals, particularly those who hold positions of authority within religious organizations, as well as the repercussions that arise when those expectations are seen to be unmet. And the content that was inserted definitely gives the impression that there is a desire within the community for more openness in the manner in which problems of this nature are dealt with, as well as for accountability in circumstances when acts are perceived to be damaging or hypocritical. It would appear that the central points of this controversy surrounding Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss are, accusations of hypocrisy, arising from actions that seem to contradict stated beliefs, questions regarding potentially inappropriate behavior, emotional intimacy, and then this major concern about a lack of transparency and accountability. Okay, so if we are trying to summarize all of this, it seems like based solely on what we are reading here in these excerpts, the central points of this controversy are like this. There you have it. It is a fairly accurate summary. I mean, the language that was inserted creates a picture of a community that is struggling to deal with the activities of its leaders. These actions, according to this source, have resulted in damaged reputations, reduced credibility, and this need for greater adherence to ideals of honesty and accountability. Furthermore, it is of the utmost importance to keep in mind, as we mentioned at the very beginning of this discussion, that our complete comprehension of this matter is founded only on the information that is provided in these passages. In addition, the chapter concludes with a question that is rather straightforward. The question is, what do you believe ought to take place after this? Is it appropriate to hold Joni and Doug responsible for the activities they have taken? Exactly, that is a persuasive inquiry. Taking into consideration the wider picture, I believe that this circumstance requires us to truly focus on the core principle of accountability for leaders within any society. I say this because I believe that this scenario compels us to do so. Taking into consideration the conditions at hand, what exactly does accountability entail? How does the erosion of trust between those in positions of authority and the people they serve affect the potential consequences? This is an issue that has repercussions that go much beyond the immediate circumstances of this particular instance. Indeed, that is a really significant aspect to take into consideration. Many thanks for accompanying me on this in-depth exploration today.